Hey guys, tonight we slip beneath the ash-gray skies of ancient Pompeii. Not the one buried in your history books, but the one alive with everyday clutter, clamor, and the quiet hum of routines. You wake to the low groan of wooden shutters opening, and the distant murmur of street sellers already yelling over each other for attention. The air smells like last night's hearth smoke, mixed with the tang of wet limestone and something vaguely sour you can't quite place. Maybe it's the wine. Probably the wine. Outside your doorway, a cart rattles past, the wheels thumping rhythmically over sun-baked cobblestones. The donkey pulling it looks half asleep, its ears twitching at invisible gnats. A neighbor's rooster screams like it just discovered sound, and somewhere nearby, a toddler wails because someone stole his fig. You shuffle outside wearing your tunic, slightly wrinkled, definitely reused, and slip into a pair of sandals that never quite dried from yesterday's drizzle. The stones underfoot are cool this early, before the sun scorches them into tiny griddles. Around you, the city is stirring with the same groggy precision it has every day for decades. First order of business: water. You trudge to the nearest public fountain, carved stone worn smooth by countless hands. You cup the flow with your palms, trying to ignore the slightly metallic taste. Behind you, someone grumbles about the aqueduct pressure, but it's not like there's a complaint department in Rome for this kind of thing. Back home, your chores are calling. Maybe you sweep your atrium. Maybe you beat dust from the sleeping mats. Maybe you yell at a cousin to stop chasing chickens again. If you're a slave, there's less choice and more orders. If you're a merchant, the pressure's on to open shop before the best foot traffic fades away with the noon sun. Now and then, a fish seller passes, his basket wobbling with still twitching sardines. The scent follows him like an unwanted cloud. A woman next door argues loudly with a man over the price of a bolt of fabric. She says he overcharged. He says he undercharged. And a small crowd gathers just to enjoy the entertainment. You walk past a household shrine built into a wall, barely big enough for a candle and a pair of carved figurines. Laris, the guardian spirits of the house. You nod, out of habit. They're always watching, and honestly, they might be more consistent than most landlords. You glance toward Vesuvius in the distance. It's not particularly threatening right now. Just another mountain on the skyline. You don't know that the earth beneath you has been rumbling in whispers for months. But maybe you've noticed that the dogs bark longer these days, or that your clay cups rattle ever so slightly at odd hours. Probably just the wine again. Historians still argue whether Pompeians felt the signs in time, whether they noticed their wells dropping, their animals acting strange, or their walls cracking ever so slowly. You? You're too busy getting through the morning without tripping over someone's runaway goat. A vendor starts shouting again. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven, and you realize your stomach's been growling since dawn. That's your cue. Off you go, elbowing past a man carrying a giant amphora, a kid with soot on his face, and a woman who might be wearing your missing sandals. You can't prove it. And through all this messy, noisy, lively buzz, you feel a strange comfort, because tomorrow you'll do it all again, or at least you think you will. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're tuning in from and how late you're staying up for this sleepy slice of ancient life. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Breakfast in Pompeii isn't exactly what you'd call gourmet. You shuffle over to a modest wooden table, where a small pile of bread sits in a rough ceramic bowl, hard enough to be considered a weapon in some provinces. It's not fresh, but if you dunk it in watered-down wine or drizzle it with a bit of olive oil or honey, if you're lucky enough to have any, it's vaguely chewable. You take a bite and try not to think about how yesterday's fish sauce was stored in the same bowl. Fermented fish sauce, by the way, is called garum. It's everywhere. It's in everything. And it smells like something you'd use to clean paintbrushes. But in Pompeii, it's liquid gold. Even the fanciest households stock it proudly, and there are whole factories on the edge of town devoted to churning out vats of the stuff, day and night. The aroma clings to the air like gossip in the bathhouse. You sip your wine, yes, with breakfast, and try not to dwell on how it's more vinegar than vino. Wine here is rarely served undiluted. That's considered barbaric. The good stuff is reserved for festivals or bribes. Today, it's just the usual mix: purple, sour, and just strong enough to take the edge off a nagging hangover from last night's amphora too many. The street outside is warming up. A few early risers pass by, some of them stopping at the corner bakery. You can tell it's open by the curl of smoke from the oven vent and the occasional shout of, "Don't burn it this time, Felix," from inside. You join the small crowd and buy a panis quadratus, the famous round loaf scored into wedges for easy tearing. It's blackened on one edge. You pretend that's on purpose. Historians still debate whether breakfast in Pompeii was always this simple, or if wealthier citizens occasionally splurged, maybe on fruit, cheese, or leftover stew. Some murals suggest more variety, but those might be idealized, the ancient equivalent of a filtered Instagram post. As you chew, your neighbor shuffles over, already mid-rant about her sister-in-law's dramatic exit from a dinner party. Something about bad seating arrangements and a scandalous lack of wine. You nod politely, savoring the absurdity more than the food. In Pompeii, gossip is the real morning fuel. By now, the sun is climbing, casting angular shadows through the colonnades. A man leading a donkey piled with amphora passes by. You recognize him vaguely. He's the guy who once spilled oil all over the temple steps. People still bring it up. Pompeii has a long memory for short disasters. A little further down the road, a group of kids are already playing osso buco, a game with knuckle bones and surprisingly elaborate rules you've never quite understood. One of them shouts that another's cheating. A second later, someone's sandal goes flying into a water trough. You pass a stray dog scratching itself beside a sun-bleached statue. You're not sure if it belongs to anyone, but it's wearing what appears to be a flower garland. Maybe a leftover from last week's festival. Maybe just Pompeii being Pompeii. You turn the corner and see a woman selling dates from a basket. You consider buying one until you remember that dates are expensive, and last time they gave you the runs. You opt for another bite of stale bread and consider that a win. Quirky fact of the day. Some Romans believed that eating cabbage in the morning could prevent hangovers later. You eye a cabbage cart suspiciously and decide to risk it without. The world of Pompeii is humming now. The clang of a smith's hammer echoes down the alley. The call of a man advertising second-hand togas floats over the rooftops. You wipe crumbs from your tunic and head back toward the baths. You'll need a rinse before doing anything productive, or at least something that passes for productive around here. You step carefully over a steaming pile left by a mule. Pompeii is many things, but it's definitely not big on sanitation. A boy with a bucket makes a half-hearted attempt to clean it up, misses entirely, and moves on with the optimism only children can muster. As you approach the public baths, you hear the familiar scrape of wooden sandals on tile and the splash of water being poured into a basin. Time to clean off the dust of sleep and whatever else the morning streets have thrown at you. You glance once more at the distant mountain. It looms, still and quiet, like a god waiting to speak. But for now, your only concern is whether the bath attendant remembered to heat the water this time. You arrive at the bathhouse, just as the stone entrance is echoing with the footsteps of early patrons, men in sandals, children giggling, even a senator or two pretending not to notice the smell of unwashed feet. The thermi is already bustling. You hand a coin to the porter, who grunts something that might be a greeting, or just indigestion. Either way, you're in. The floor is cool against your soles as you step into the apoditerium, the changing room. Benches line the walls, and the niches above are already filling with tunics and belts. You pick a spot that isn't sticky. Tuck your clothes in the least suspicious-looking hole in the wall, and clutch your bathing gear like a sacred relic. Pompeians don't exactly believe in soap. Instead, they slather themselves in oil, yes, oil, then scrape it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. It's like exfoliating with salad dressing. The oil loosens dirt, and the strigil takes it off, hopefully, depending on how enthusiastically you scrape. You ease into the tepidarium, the warm room, where the air hangs heavy and damp. Your skin immediately begins to sweat, which is apparently the goal. Steam rises around you, scented faintly with eucalyptus. Leaves someone's tossed into a corner brazier, maybe for hygiene, maybe just to cover the smell of feet. A man beside you begins grumbling about the temperature, blaming it on the slave in charge of heating the hypocaust, the underground furnace system that warms the floors and walls. Historians still argue whether this system was efficient or a total fire hazard waiting to happen. You decide to let the scholars keep arguing while you soak in the ambiance. Then comes the caldarium, the hot room. It's the Roman version of a sauna, complete with a heated plunge bath. The steam fogs your eyes, and you blink slowly, trying to locate the stone steps without slipping, and making headlines as the clumsiest bather of the week. Someone behind you mutters a prayer to Fortuna, because why not? You dip into the water, sighing as it envelops you in warmth. Your limbs soften. Your brain starts to melt a little too. The noise of the city fades, replaced by the soft splash of water and the lazy hum of conversation echoing off the tiled walls. Someone near the far edge is recounting a dream they had, something about a flying donkey and a talking statue. Everyone nods like it's perfectly normal. Maybe it is. The man's also eating a fig in the bath, which seems wrong, but no one's stopping him. You close your eyes and let the heat lull you. Every now and then, you feel the vibration of footsteps through the floor as people move between rooms. It's like the whole building is breathing. Quirky tidbit time. Some bathhouses used crushed crocodile dung in their beauty treatments. You don't see any today, thankfully, but you make a mental note not to accept any free facial scrubs from the enthusiastic vendor outside. After you've sweated enough to question your own body composition, you move back to the frigidarium, the cold room. You take one look at the plunge pool, a beautiful blue-green rectangle, and immediately regret all your life choices. But tradition is tradition. You brace yourself, step in, and let out a noise somewhere between a gasp and a hiccup. The cold grabs your lungs, slaps your face, and tells you to rethink your priorities. You emerge feeling reborn, or at least reset. Your skin tingles, your muscles ache less, and your hair now resembles wet moss. But that's fine. You collect your tunic, which is now slightly damp and very wrinkled, and step back out into the sun, blinking like a cave creature. Outside, a breeze cuts through the humidity, and the smell of bread, charcoal, and sewage greets you like a familiar song. You walk a little lighter now, a little cleaner, even if your armpits still smell vaguely of olives. The bathhouse crowd disperses into the streets, some heading to shops, others to the forum. You pause at a fruit stall, eyeing some bruised apples. The vendor recognizes you and says they're not as bruised as they look. You both pretend that's reassuring. You keep moving, letting your feet decide your direction. Pompeii isn't laid out like a grid. It's more like someone spilled a bowl of noodles and called it city planning. Streets twist, corners double back on themselves, and every alley seems to hide either a surprise shrine or a sleeping cat. You pass another bathhouse on the way, a fancier one with mosaic floors and less graffiti. You once heard a rumor that Emperor Nero himself visited a bath like that. Historians still debate if it was here or a nearby Herculaneum. You imagine him here anyway, adjusting his laurel crown while complaining about the water pressure. The sun is getting stronger now, casting sharp shadows across the paving stones. You've bathed, you've scraped, you've survived the cold plunge of doom. The day stretches before you, and you wonder, should you visit the market, or just find a spot to sit and judge people's sandals? Either way, it's time to face the streets of Pompeii again. Just watch your step. The streets of Pompeii are alive now, fully, unapologetically, and inescapably. You step out from the bathhouse into a tangle of sound and motion, like someone left a window open and an entire festival blew in. Sandals clap against uneven stone. Oxen grunt as they haul carts through alleys barely wide enough for a child's imagination, and a dog barks at a column as though it owes him money. You squint at the brightness. The sun reflects off every limestone wall and terracotta roof tile, making you feel like you've stepped into a frying pan with social obligations. The air is thick, not quite hot, not quite pleasant. It smells like wet plaster, garlic, dust, and a pinch of ambition. You dodge a puddle that might be water, or not. Pompeii doesn't really do plumbing the way you wish it would. Sure, there are raised stepping stones in some streets, but they aren't there for fun. They're there because the roads double as open sewers. You try not to think too hard about it as you leap gracefully, well, semi-gracefully, across. A man selling roasted chickpeas yells out a price that is either a great deal or a complete scam. It's impossible to know. You give him a look that says, "I'm watching you," and he gives you one back that says, "So? Classic Pompeii." You pass a painted advertisement on a wall, something about a comedy play happening at the amphitheater this week. The actor's face is oddly familiar. Then you realize it's probably just a reused stencil. Roman marketing has its moments, but originality isn't always one of them. You hear a scuffle ahead. Two women are loudly arguing near a vegetable stall, each insisting the other stole a basket of leeks. You slow down, not to help, just to listen. One of them brings up last year's Saturnalia party and how everyone knows what really happened. The leeks are forgotten. The crowd is riveted. As you keep walking, you notice a graffiti-covered wall. Pompeians love their walls. They write on them constantly. Some are declarations of love, others are ads, and a few are truly unhinged. One nearby reads, "Secundus says hello to his friends." Another, less friendly, "Chione is a thief." Historians still argue whether graffiti like this was meant for humor, protest, or just pure chaos. Either way, it's like ancient Twitter, only dustier. You approach a crossroad where the noise multiplies. A donkey refuses to move. A cart driver is swearing creatively, but still PG-13, don't worry. And a musician nearby is playing what you generously assume is music. He's got a lyre, at least. And he's trying. Shops line both sides of the road. Some are open-fronted. Others have little counters built into their walls. You pass a Pholonica, a laundromat, Roman style. Inside, workers stomp on tunics in vats of human urine, which they use to clean fabric. Yes, You heard that right. You tip your nose skyward and keep walking. A boy runs past you holding a chunk of bread bigger than his face. Behind him, a shopkeeper waves a stick and yells something about theft and bad parenting. The boy disappears around a corner. The stick never lands. You glance up at the looming facades of modest homes and grand villas. Balconies hang overhead, some with flower pots, others just with laundry flapping like surrender flags. A cat lounges in one, sun-drunk and regal. You wave. It ignores you. Further on, a public water fountain gurgles peacefully. A woman is filling her amphora, balancing it on her hip with practiced ease. You take a sip and watch two men debate the price of wax tablets. One insists they were cheaper last week. The other insists his competitor is sleeping with a temple priestess. Neither backs down. A goat with a bell around its neck wanders into your path, sniffs your tunic, and decides you're not edible. You both move on. It's the most civil encounter you've had all morning. Quirky tidbit for the day. Pompeii had traffic problems. Archaeologists found wheel ruts worn deep into stone streets, showing that congestion wasn't invented by modern cities. In fact, some roads had timed access. Basically, ancient traffic laws. Somehow, that makes the goat seem even more polite. You pass a bakery where loaves are being removed from a blackened oven. The baker's covered in flour and sweat and yells something joyful in your direction. Maybe it's a greeting. Maybe he just likes yelling. Either way, the smell of hot bread pulls at your stomach like a friendly mugging. The deeper you wander into town, the louder and more intricate the chaos becomes. A boy offers you a handmade dice set, bone-carved, probably not cursed. Probably. You pass a tavern doorway filled with laughter, a stray chicken, and one man definitely asleep on his own arm. Finally, you duck into a shaded colonnade for a moment's peace. Columns rise around you, cool and fluted, the air noticeably fresher. You watch as the street continues without you, like a noisy stream of Roman drama. You wipe sweat from your brow and lean back just for a moment. Pompeii never really quiets down. But if you listen closely, if you just let the noise wash over you like waves, it becomes a rhythm, a pulse, a strange and messy lullaby. The scent hits you first, warm, smoky, and a little bit burnt. You follow it instinctively, like a cartoon character floating on invisible aroma waves. It leads you to one of Pompeii's many bakeries. From the outside, it doesn't look like much, just a low stone building with soot-streaked walls and an open archway. But inside, it's a miniature volcano of activity. A worker pulls a long-handled paddle from a glowing domed oven, revealing the latest batch of panis quadratus, those famous round loaves marked into wedges, like Roman precursors to dinner rolls. The crusts are dark, some more than others, with an edge of char that says, "We tried our best." You might not realize it now, but one day, archaeologists will find loaves like these still intact, carbonized by the eruption, not exactly what the bakers had in mind. You lean against the counter as the heat rolls out. A layer of fine ash dust coats the floor, not from the volcano, yet, but from yesterday's baking. You try not to cough. Behind the oven, slaves mix flour, water, and sourdough starter in large basins. Their arms are dusted white, and one of them has dough stuck in his hair, like a lumpy crown. He doesn't care. Flour in Pompeii isn't just flour. Some bakeries add chalk to stretch it. Others grind it finer, using millstones turned by donkeys. You glance through the back and spot one such donkey, circling slowly around a stone wheel, its eyes half-lidded with eternal resignation. It's probably seen more bread than most emperors. A boy with a tray offers you a sample chunk. It's dense, chewy, and surprisingly flavorful. If you ignore the hint of smoke and something that might be, is that grit? Probably from the grinding stones. Quirky detail incoming. Some loaves had embedded stamps to indicate which bakery or owner they belonged to. Bread had branding before most people had surnames. You chat briefly with the head baker, who brags about his secret recipe and complains about the price of imported honey. You nod sympathetically, even though you're not sure you've ever tasted real honey. He tosses a piece of burnt crust to a dog waiting by the door. The dog catches it mid-air and wags like it just won the lottery. Stepping back outside, the scent of ash-baked bread clings to your tunic. You rub your eyes, which are watering slightly from the smoke, and blink into the brightness. The streets are louder now, if that's even possible. Somewhere nearby, someone drops a jar. It shatters spectacularly. A cheer erupts. Classic Pompeii. You make your way toward another bakery just a few alleys over. This one smaller, more cramped. The counter is manned by a woman with arms like marble columns and a scowl that could curdle milk. She nods at your approach and gestures to a tray of smaller loaves, some filled with olives or bits of cheese. You buy one with a copper coin and try not to look too grateful. As you chew, you remember a rumor you heard, that a small faction of bakers are secretly experimenting with adding figs to their dough. Revolutionary, dangerous, delicious. Historians still argue whether these innovations were common or only enjoyed by the elite. Either way, you keep your ears open for fig-based contraband. Back on the main road, a merchant pushes a cart piled high with baskets of wheat and barley. You dodge him expertly, which is more than can be said for the poor soul who gets bumped and drops a string of garlic bulbs into the gutter. The merchant doesn't stop. The garlic guy lets out a sigh of such deep tragedy, it deserves a statue. Another bakery comes into view. Yes, another. Pompeii is practically a carb-based economy. This one has murals on the outside wall showing scenes of grain being harvested, ground, and baked. You wonder if the artist was paid in loaves. Probably. Inside, it's quieter. This bakery seems to cater to a more refined crowd, Fewer blackened loaves, more pretensions. You admire a display of sculpted bread, braided, ringed, even shaped like fish. One loaf has what looks like a poem carved into it. You can't read it. You nod as if you can. Back on the street, you pass a house with a peculiar setup, a private oven. This is a luxury. Most households don't bake at home. They bring their dough to public bakeries. But here, someone's rich enough, or paranoid enough, to keep the fire close. A servant fans the flames while a woman with jeweled fingers supervises from a shaded doorway. She offers you a look that says, "Don't even think about asking for a sample." You keep walking, stomach satisfied, and fingers slightly sticky with olive oil. As the sun climbs higher, the scent of fresh bread mixes with something less pleasant. You wrinkle your nose. A trash pile has been left smoldering in the corner of an alley. You steer clear, though a flock of pigeons seems to be enjoying it immensely. You pass a wall with yet more graffiti. I made bread and loved a girl. The bread was warmer. You laugh softly. Pompeians never miss a chance to leave their feelings behind in writing. At last, you reach a small square with a stone bench. You sit, let the crumbs fall where they may, and stretch your legs. The loaf is long gone. A cat eyes you from a rooftop. A child chases a hoop down the lane, and the scent of baking bread still floats through the air, like a quiet promise or a very delicious warning. You rise from the bench with a soft groan and brush the crumbs off your tunic, leaving a trail for pigeons, or possibly that judgmental cat. It's time to face one of the most chaotic corners of Pompeii, the marketplace. The Forum Holitorium, as the locals call it, pulses with life, noise, and more smells than your nose was designed to process before lunch. As you approach, you can already hear the rising chorus of voices, bartering, bragging, arguing over change, and someone singing badly while plucking a lyre like it owes him money. You push through the crowd slowly, keeping one hand on your coin pouch like your mother warned you to. The market is a sensory overload. Clay jars glisten with olive oil. Wicker baskets overflow with onions, leeks, and grapes so ripe they look almost too decadent for daylight. Fish twitch on slabs of marble. Cheese sweats under the heat, and so do you. A vendor waves a pomegranate at you and yells a price that can't possibly be real. You shake your head, and he sighs as if you've personally ruined his entire career. Another man offers to sell you saffron, imported from faraway lands. Judging by the smell, it's more likely dried weeds and hope. You smile politely and keep moving. At one corner, a stall features bronze cooking pans and clay amphorae. A woman holds one up and sniffs deeply, trying to guess if it previously stored olive oil or goat urine. Not always easy to tell. You make eye contact and nod. Solidarity in confusion. To your left, a butcher hacks at a haunch of something. You don't ask what. It's better that way. Beside him, another man roasts sausages over a tiny fire pot, while explaining loudly that his meat comes from the finest livestock, unlike his competitors, which, according to him, tastes like sandals and regret. Quirky side note: The Pompeian market wasn't just for goods. It was a political hotspot, too. Candidates for local office often camped near the market stalls, shaking hands, handing out slogans, and occasionally bribing the crowd with free bread or wine. Historians still argue whether these early political campaigns were organized efforts or just glorified food fights. You pass a man with scrolls tucked under one arm, trying to sell verses of poetry never before read aloud. You buy one out of pity. It's terrible. He thanks you profusely and yells, "A true patron of the arts," as if you've just sponsored a marble statue. Further in, the crowd thickens. A group of children chase a chicken that somehow escaped a nearby stall. Their laughter is loud, uninhibited. The chicken is not laughing. You dodge a low-hanging rack of herbs and almost trip over a dog lounging under a table. Its ears twitch, but otherwise it doesn't care. A potter spins a wheel nearby, hands coated in clay, forming a jar while telling a passerby he once made a bowl for a senator's wife. Whether she used it for fruit or throwing at her husband, he doesn't say. You step past a narrow alley where two men are playing dice in the shade. Their game is intense, punctuated by muttered curses and dramatic groans. You watch just long enough to get tempted, then remember what happened last time. Let's just say you still owe a man 3 eggs and an apology. At a fig stall, you overhear a conversation about the volcanic tremors. One woman insists she felt the ground shift 2 nights ago. Another says she's noticed cracks forming in her courtyard. The fig seller waves it off with a laugh. "Just the gods grumbling about the price of figs," he jokes. You laugh too, but somewhere deep in your chest, a little seed of unease is planted. A statue of Mercury watches over the market from his pedestal, 1 foot raised mid-step, always moving, always watching. A few flowers lie at its base. Someone's made an offering, maybe asking for luck or safe sales or better weather, maybe just asking to get through the day. You pause by a spice merchant whose booth smells like an ancient dream. Cumin, coriander, peppercorns from India, cinnamon bark, all neatly stored in waxed cloth bundles or clay pots. He sees you eyeing the cinnamon and offers you a whiff. You close your eyes and inhale. It's a moment of peace in the middle of the storm. You pass a final stall selling tiny bronze figurines of gods, animals, and questionable body parts. Yes, those ones. The vendor explains their votive offerings. You nod as though you were definitely not giggling. The forum opens up into the larger civic square, but you linger in the market just a moment longer. A gust of wind blows dust in your face. You blink, adjust your tunic, and glance around one last time. This chaos, this noise, this barely controlled swarm of voices and smells and colors. It's the heartbeat of Pompeii. A place where fortunes are made and lost with a handful of olives and a raised eyebrow, where deals are struck and gossiped about in the same breath, where every stone underfoot has been worn smooth by centuries of feet chasing the next good trade. You take one last look over your shoulder as you leave. A girl chases a dog. A man shouts about cheese. And the world spins on, utterly unaware of how fragile it is. You leave the market behind, your arms a little sore from carrying that olive jar you didn't plan on buying but somehow now own. The streets funnel you toward a part of town less glamorous, less fragrant, and definitely less photogenic. You already know what's coming. It's time to face one of Pompeii's less celebrated institutions, the public toilet. Now, before you get squeamish, understand that for a city as advanced as Pompeii, with running water, paved streets, and heated baths, they really dropped the ball when it came to privacy. The latrina is a communal space. Yes, communal, as in a long bench with holes carved out side by side with 0 partitions. Just vibes. You step inside the shadowy stone structure, greeted by a dank smell that's not quite foul, but not quite forgivable either. The air is humid. The walls are bare, except for a few smudged graffiti. One seems to say, "Brutus was here. Don't sit too long." You find a spot and try not to make eye contact with the person beside you. He nods anyway, cheerfully. You give him the tightest smile you can manage and glance down at the water channel running below the stone bench. That's the sewer, primitive, but functional. Sort of. There's no toilet paper here. Instead, a shared sponge on a stick sits in a jar of vinegar water nearby. You think about it. Then you think again. You suddenly appreciate every modern convenience you've ever taken for granted. Quirky fact: some wealthier Romans brought their own personal sponges. Imagine a monogrammed hygiene tool, and had slaves carry them. Sanitation with flair. As you finish your business and exit with as much dignity as possible, you pass a man arguing with a water maintenance worker. Something about a clogged drain near the Follonica. The worker shrugs and says it's not his problem. They both stomp off in opposite directions, each muttering about the city council. You stroll down the street, still a little unsettled. The gutters on either side of the road are doing their best, channeling waste and water downhill toward the sea. But let's be honest. Best is a generous word. The smell follows you like a stray dog with trust issues. You pause near a corner where 3 large jars are built into a stone counter. This is a popina, a street bar. The jars hold wine, lentils, or questionable stew. You peer inside one. It's warm, possibly alive. You decide to keep moving. On the next block, you pass by a building with a statue of a river god lounging dramatically. Water dribbles from a spout into a shallow basin. A child splashes in it while his mother scolds him half-heartedly. You fill your hands and rinse your face. The water's cool, refreshing, and just clean enough to forget what you've been through. Now, it's not all bad news. Some homes, especially wealthier ones, have private latrines. Tiny, closet-like spaces built into a corner of the atrium or near the kitchen. Historians still argue whether this proximity to food was coincidence or pure defiance of good sense. As you continue on, you pass a block of apartment-style housing, the insulae. These are for the working class. Space is tight, walls are thin, and the smell of cooking, sweat, and oil smoke lingers in the narrow corridors. The shared toilets here are even worse. You make a mental note. Bring extra coins next time, just in case you need to use a more respectable latrine. You turn a corner and nearly walk into a man carrying a chamber pot. He grins apologetically and points to the open drain. You give him a wide berth. At least he's aiming properly. That's not always a guarantee. Quirky tidbit. Romans believed certain gods watched over bathrooms, like Cloacina, goddess of the sewer. Offerings were sometimes made to keep pipes flowing and spirits appeased. You wonder what kind of divine resume qualifies someone as the goddess of waste, then chuckle to yourself. Someone had to do it. Further down, you spot a construction site where workers are repairing a section of road. A pile of stones sits nearby, some stained from centuries of wear. You overhear one of them muttering about how his brother fell into a latrine last week. It's told like a cautionary tale, though the others just laugh. You step around a puddle with questionable origins and catch sight of Mount Vesuvius again. It looms in the distance, tranquil and unbothered. You wonder if anyone has ever tried to blame the bad plumbing on volcanic fumes. Probably. It wouldn't be the weirdest excuse you've heard today. Finally, you stop at another public fountain. This one's quieter, tucked between two houses with bright frescoes. The water trickles gently, and a few bees buzz around the moss at the edges. You sit on the low stone wall and breathe deeply, until a donkey behind you lets out a particularly judgmental snort. You laugh softly. Life in Pompeii isn't always clean. It's rarely convenient. But it moves forward with a kind of messy charm, like a city constantly tripping over its own sandals and still managing to smile. You make your way back toward your domus, or at least what passes for a home in your corner of Pompeii. The city is a patchwork of spaces, grand villas with marble pillars, tiny shacks pressed between shops, and everything in between. Yours falls somewhere in the middle. It's modest, a little cracked, but it has a roof, 4-ish walls, and a small courtyard where you can sit and pretend not to hear your neighbors yelling about goats again. You step through the wooden door, which creaks like it's auditioning for a tragic stage play. Inside, the atrium is dim, lit by a shaft of sunlight beaming down through the compluvium, a square hole in the ceiling designed to let in rain and light, which also doubles as a brilliant mosquito invitation. Beneath it, the impluvium, a shallow pool, is supposed to collect water, but today it's mostly dry, except for a few floating leaves and one very confused lizard doing laps. You let it be. It's probably got a full itinerary. Your household shrine, the lararium, sits tucked into a niche by the wall. 2 tiny clay figures stand guard there, dressed in painted tunics, their hands raised in silent blessing or mild judgment. It's hard to tell. These are your lares, the household gods. Every day, you toss a pinch of flour or a bit of wine into their dish. Today, You offer a crumb of bread. It's all you've got, and you whisper a quick prayer anyway. They've seen worse. Historians still argue whether people took their domestic rituals seriously or just went through the motions. But when your neighbor's cat gave birth to a litter of hairless kittens last week, you lit a whole candle just in case. Better safe than divinely cursed. You sit on a low stool and glance around. The walls are painted, though the colors are fading. Red ochre and deep yellow scenes of pastoral life, or maybe heroic myths. Hard to say. One panel is supposed to be Hercules wrestling something, but it looks more like he's tickling a very angry goat. Still, it gives the room character. Your cousin walks in, holding a bundle of laundry and muttering about someone stealing the family's best cooking pot. Again. You both know who it was, but accusing a neighbor without proof leads to 3 days of side eyes and passive-aggressive bread burning. Best to wait until it turns up mysteriously outside your door. You wander into the kitchen, which is less a room and more a closet with a hearth. Smoke stains line the ceiling. A pot of lentils simmers gently, and a small clay dish holds garlic and wilted herbs. There's a loaf of bread going stale in a basket, and a cracked bowl of olives you're pretty sure are older than yesterday's sunrise. You grab one anyway. A lizard skitters across the wall. You wonder how it got inside, and then remember there's a hole in the corner big enough for a goat, let alone a lizard. You make a mental note to fix it later, which means never. You step out into the courtyard, which has just enough space for a few potted plants and a bench. One plant is thriving. The rest are in various stages of despair. You sit down, stretch your legs, and glance up at the sky. Still clear, still bright. You hear a rooster, a donkey, and a child crying all at once. You sigh contentedly. Home. In wealthier homes, this courtyard might be a lush garden with fountains and statues. In the villas along Pompeii's Via dell'Abbondanza, some atriums are decorated with elaborate mosaics of dolphins, lions, or even scenes from myths. Achilles hiding in a dress, Narcissus falling in love with his reflection. Meanwhile, you have a cracked tile shaped vaguely like a banana. Maybe it's a dolphin, you're not sure. Quirky fact. Some Pompeians painted fake doors and windows on their walls to make small homes feel bigger. It's basically the ancient version of open concept design, only with more imagination and fewer real estate agents. You wander into a sleeping room, cubicula they're called. It's tiny, with a low bed and a chest for clothes. A clay lamp sits on a shelf, burned almost dry. You flop down for a second, the straw-stuffed mattress crunching beneath you. Not the comfiest thing in the empire, but it gets the job done. You lie there for a bit, staring at the ceiling. A crack snakes across it like a lazy lightning bolt. You wonder if it's always been there, or if the earth has been shifting again. You tell yourself it's fine, just settling. Pompeii's always settling, right? Your cousin calls from the courtyard, asking if you remembered to buy more oil. You pretend not to hear. you'll lie and say the market was out. You're too tired to invent a better excuse. The Lares still watch from their shrine as you sit up and rub your eyes. Their expressions haven't changed, still content or mildly annoyed. It's hard to tell with clay. As you move back toward the front door, you pass a small mosaic of a barking dog embedded into the floor. Cave Canem, it reads. Beware of dog. It's more decorative than practical, though the dog next door does occasionally try to bite your sandals. You wonder if the sign's meant for him. You step outside once again. The street greets you like it always does, with noise, motion, and just enough dust in the air to make you consider another bath. But not yet. For now, the Lars are content. Your roof is still standing, and your olives were only mildly suspicious. That's a good day in Pompeii. The sun has begun to tilt westward, casting long golden slashes across the rooftops of Pompeii. Shadows stretch like lazy cats, and the heat simmers instead of blazes. It's the kind of hour when everyone pretends to slow down, but there's still so much left to do. And unfortunately, you're wearing a toga. Now, don't get excited. Togas are not glamorous. They are not fun. They are not breezy robes fit for gladiators and emperors. They are massive, itchy, linen beasts that require the patience of a monk and the dexterity of an octopus to wear properly. And once you've got one on, you can't sit comfortably, you can't run, and you definitely can't pee without drama. You wrestle with the fabric, trying to remember the fold that goes under the arm, but over the shoulder. Or was it the other way? Historians still argue whether the average Roman actually wore togas regularly, or only for public duties. You decide that if you were rich, you'd outsource this nonsense to a professional toga wrapper. Or just fake your status with a fancy belt. Once draped and draped again, you step outside and immediately regret it. The toga drags at your side like a needy ghost, and your sandals, made of stiff leather straps and questionable stitching, rub exactly the wrong parts of your feet. You limp nobly toward the forum. A woman passes in a stola, the Roman equivalent of a toga for women, long, layered, and just as impractical. She's adjusting her veil with one hand and scolding a child with the other. You nod in respect. That's multitasking. Pompeian fashion is a strange mix of status, symbolism, and straight-up discomfort. Dyed fabrics show off wealth, purple especially. A splash of Tyrian purple can say, "I'm connected," even if the rest of your tunic is held together with hopes and vinegar. Quirky fact, that purple dye, made from crushed sea snails, thousands of them. You look at someone's deep plum cloak and suddenly can't stop thinking about fish guts. You spot a young man trying to impress a pair of girls by adjusting the drape of his toga just so. It slips off his shoulder and into the dirt. One girl giggles. He turns bright red, mutters something about fashion being political, and flees behind a column. Footwear isn't much better. Some people wear calci, full shoes with laces and thick soles. Others go barefoot. You've even seen a few sandals with little metal studs hammered into the bottom. Great for grip, less great for silence. You pass a man who sounds like he's being followed by a tap-dancing beetle. The richer citizens parade their fashion with flair. Embroidered borders, gold rings, and hairstyles that could support entire ecosystems. You once heard that noble women used heated iron rods to curl their hair into elaborate spirals. A fire hazard, yes, but beauty is pain, especially in Latin. You duck into a tailor's stall tucked into an alleyway. Bolts of fabric hang from the rafters. Undyed wool, fine linen, even imported silk for those who know someone who knows someone. The tailor eyes your fraying hem and offers a thread with the grace of a man who has seen too many wardrobe malfunctions. As you leave, you pass another customer inspecting a belt with tiny bronze studs. The tailor assures him it's what senators are wearing this season. You smile. Ancient Rome had trends, and just like today, half of them made no sense. You loop back toward the temple steps, where a group of magistrates are holding a public meeting. Every one of them wears a toga with a broad purple stripe. Laticlavia, the real deal. They sit rigidly, sweating through their layers, pretending this is all very serious business and not just a slow-motion fashion show. A woman walks by wearing a necklace of glass beads that shimmer in the sunlight. Jewelry in Pompeii is a curious mix, some made of precious stones and gold, others of painted clay, all worn with equal pride. Historians still debate whether certain pieces had symbolic meanings or were just bling. Either way, they sparkle. Further on, you spot a shop selling hairpins and cosmetics. A young girl is testing out a kohl stick in a hand mirror polished to within an inch of its life. She tries a smile. It looks good. You give her a thumbs up. She beams. Pompeii may not be the runway of the empire, but its citizens care deeply about how they look. You've seen it in the effort behind braided hairdos, the way even the humblest tunic gets stitched with care, and the sheer determination of men dragging their togas through the dust without breaking composure. You pause to rest at a shaded column near the Forum fountain. You've made it through the toga ordeal without tripping over yourself or flashing a senator. That's a win. The fountain gurgles softly beside you. A bird flits across the rim, dipping its beak. A young couple walks past arm in arm, their clothes simple but clean, their smiles effortless. You think, despite the chafing and the sun, there's something kind of beautiful about it all. The way people wear their identities, hopes, and histories quite literally on their sleeves. The way cloth, pins, and dye tell a story. And even if your story today involves one wrinkled tunic, a few sandals blisters, and a toga that still doesn't sit right, you're part of it. You rise again, adjusting the folds, and step back into the golden streets of Pompeii, swishing slightly, sweating definitely, but walking like you mean it. You shuffle past a trio of street performers, juggling pottery lids to the beat of a flute, and head toward the outer lanes of town, where the noise begins to thin, and the city reveals its quieter, dustier gears. The world of Pompeii at work. Everyone here seems to be doing something, even if it's not entirely clear what. You pass a man painting a shop sign by hand. He's squinting at the letters, muttering curses about pigeons and poor lighting. Behind him, a boy sweeps the threshold of a taberna that smells like warm vinegar and pickled fish. You nod. He nods. Work is work. In Pompeii, having a job doesn't necessarily mean having one that makes sense. You've seen everything from perfume mixers to goat brokers to guys who just seem to sit on crates all day giving directions to people who didn't ask. The city hums with labor, both essential and questionable. Today, your cousin is off weighing olives in a storeroom near the port. You visited once. It smelled like sweat and brine and ambition. He says business is good, but his sandals are held together with twine, so debatable. You cross into a row of workshops where artisans shape metal into tools, weapons, or decorative knobs for furniture no one can afford. Sparks flash from a forge as a blacksmith hammers rhythmically, shaping something sharp and serious. He wipes sweat from his brow with a rag darker than night, and grins like someone who enjoys making things that can ruin your day. Next door, a woman is etching patterns into pottery. Her fingers are stained with red slip, her brow furrowed in focus. You pause to admire a cup decorated with a clumsy but charming dolphin. She catches your look and shrugs. It's swimming upside down. Artistic license. You nod solemnly, as if this makes complete sense. You walk on, only to stumble, literally, into a man hauling a basket of sea snails. You gag slightly. He apologizes, but proudly explains they're for making dye. Yes, the same purple dye that only the wealthy can afford. Quirky fact, it takes thousands of those snails to make even a small vial. The smell, indescribable. The status, immaculate. Further down, you pass by a mosaic workshop where tiny tiles are being arranged into what might eventually be a lion, a fish, or a very muscular centaur. The artist looks up at you with eyes as bloodshot as a gladiator's, holding up a tile the size of a fingernail. 6 more months, he says. You wish him strength. And then there's the garum factory. Oh, you can smell it before you see it. Big clay vats bubble ominously with fermenting fish sauce. You wonder who was the first person to smell that and think, let's eat it. Historians still debate whether Pompeians truly loved garum's taste, or just endured it like a stubborn family member. You cut across a narrow alley, where a group of laborers unload crates from a donkey cart. The crates are marked with charcoal symbols: figs, wine, maybe glass. You offer to help lift one, then remember your back, your toga, and your general dislike of effort. You smile, wave, and keep moving. Next, you find yourself in the dye house, where long pieces of fabric hang like damp banners of war. The air is thick with fumes. A man dips a tunic into a vat with tongs and then slaps it against a wooden board, muttering that it still isn't blue enough. You wonder what happens to his lungs. You don't ask. On the corner of this same block, a grizzled old man sharpens knives on a whetstone, his foot working the pedal with mechanical rhythm. He doesn't speak, but his side eye is fluent in 4 languages. You keep walking. Nearby, a boy runs past yelling about someone selling love potions as near the Temple of Venus. You raise an eyebrow. Love potions? In this economy? You make a mental note to investigate later. Purely for educational purposes, of course. You loop back around and pass a chalkboard outside a bathhouse, advertising special scrapes and oils. You don't ask what that means. Some things are better left ambiguous. You finally come to a small square where artists and scribes have set up for the afternoon. One is sketching a cat sitting on a fruit basket. Another is carving letters into a tombstone with shocking casualness. You glance at it. Marcus slept through every festival and never paid his debts. A fitting legacy. Historians still argue whether all of these jobs were permanent professions, or if most Pompeians juggled roles seasonally. Harvesters becoming painters, painters becoming soldiers, soldiers becoming poets, and so on. The truth? Probably a little of everything. And then, of course, there's the job you're glad you never took. Phylonica worker. Laundering clothes in ammonia-rich human urine isn't your idea of a noble profession. But someone has to do it. And that someone is currently singing off-key while stomping tunics into frothy submission. You tip your head in respect. At last, you pause beside a fountain and sit. Your day's work may not be physical, but just observing all these trades is exhausting enough. You sip water from your hands and watch as a girl runs by with clay on her nose and a smile wider than the Appian Way. Pompeii is a machine made of mismatched gears. A blacksmith here, a baker there, a child selling figs between them. Somehow, it works. Or at least it stumbles forward in a way that feels strangely permanent. You rise, stretch your back, and step into the flow once more. A small figure in a city that never truly stops working, even when no one's exactly sure what the job is. You find yourself drawn to one of Pompeii's most peculiar institutions. Not the temples or the homes or even the bustling forums, but the local Pompeii. Bars, taverns, the beating heart of neighborhood chatter, dice games, and cheap wine poured from jars that have seen better centuries. The popina on this corner is modest, a stone counter with holes carved into it, sunken dolia jars embedded in the surface to keep food and drinks cool. One holds olives floating in oil. Another has some kind of stew. You're not sure if it's lamb, fish, or wishful thinking. You lean on the worn stone and immediately stick to it. That's how you know it's authentic. Behind the counter stands the owner, an older woman with arms like rolling pins and eyes that miss nothing. She doesn't greet you. She just raises an eyebrow and waits for your order. You ask for something red and only mildly suspicious. She nods and pours from a clay jug into a chipped cup. Pompeii's bars aren't quiet drinking holes. They're noisy, cramped, smoky, and alive. A man at the corner is reciting bad poetry to impress someone's wife. Another tries to play the flute with more effort than skill. And in the back, two young men argue about who won the last dice game. One holding up a fist, the other a broken cup. You sip your wine. It's warm, sour, possibly yesterday's leftovers. You drink it anyway. The walls are decorated with murals of Dionysus, grapes, and theater masks. Faded, but still festive. One shows a man vomiting into a vase. You assume it's satire, hopefully. You slide into a bench by the wall and settle in. The bar's energy is magnetic. A few patrons drift in and out. Someone drops a coin and spends 5 minutes patting the floor like a desperate archaeologist. Another customer offers you a bite of something wrapped in fig leaves. You decline politely. It's moving slightly. Quirky fact: archaeologists discovered over 150 popinae in Pompeii. That's a lot, especially for a city this size. Historians still argue whether this points to a culture of relaxed dining or just a deep national need for midday wine and anonymous shouting. You watch as a pair of laborers come in, their tunics dusty, their hands stained with dye or ash. They slam a few coins on the counter and demand mulsum, wine mixed with honey. The owner pours without a word. One of them asks her if she's heard about the omens lately. She scoffs. There are always omens, she mutters, especially when the wine turns. You notice a board on the wall with carved lines. A game, probably. A few dice rest beside it, handmade from bone. You pick one up, roll it idly, and watch it land on 6. You feel powerful for exactly 1 second. Then it rolls off the table and vanishes into the shadows. So much for that. Someone bursts through the door with a rooster tucked under one arm and declares he's ready to settle a bet. No one blinks. The woman behind the counter simply points toward the door. He leaves, rooster still protesting. That's Pompeii for you. Odd behavior isn't weird. It's tradition. You overhear a table discussing politics, local magistrates, upcoming games, rumors about a priest caught napping during a ritual. One man says his cousin saw smoke rising from the mountain last week. Another shrugs and says mountains smoke sometimes, like people. In the corner, an older gentleman with a faded laurel tattoo tells a story about a ghost in the amphitheater. He says it appears after midnight, mumbling the names of gladiators long dead. Everyone laughs nervously. You can't tell if the story's meant as a warning or a pitch for more wine. The sun slants lower through the doorway now, and the tavern glows orange. Dust dances in the air. Someone begins singing, a hymn, perhaps, or a love song that forgot the melody. A few patrons join in, others groan. You sip your wine and decide it's not the worst performance you've heard this week. Suddenly, the bar owner slams her ladle down. "No fighting in here," she yells toward the back. The two men freeze, fists half raised. One mutters an apology. The other buys him another drink. Peace is restored. For now. You glance at the mural of Dionysus again. he's smirking, probably because he knows bars like this are eternal. The faces change, but the stories stay the same. Someone always owes someone a coin. Someone always thinks they can sing, and someone always claims they saw a god on the way home. You stand to leave. Your head is your knees slightly unsure, and your mouth tastes like sweet vinegar and secrets. You nod your thanks to the bar owner. She nods back like you've passed some invisible test. Outside, the air feels fresher. The noise of the street returns, shouting, laughter, footsteps, life. You walk slowly, letting the cool breeze work on your cheeks. The Popina's door swings shut behind you, and for just a moment, you feel like you've stepped out of a dream where nothing makes sense and everything is true. You stagger out of the Popina with a gentle wobble in your step. Not quite drunk, but just tipsy enough to question the location of your sandals. They're still on your feet, thankfully. One is squeaking, that's new. It's mid-afternoon now, and the heat has bloomed into that dense, sleepy stillness that settles over Pompeii like a damp wool blanket. Even the flies seem sluggish, lazily circling half-eaten fruit and the occasional loaf that's been left out too long. You can almost hear the city yawning. This is the hour of the Meridiatio, the Roman siesta. Technically not a law, but more of a national instinct. Shops shutter, carts roll to a stop, and even the dogs find somewhere shady to flop over. You, too, are feeling the pull of gravity. That wine wasn't exactly top shelf, and now your eyelids are staging a protest march. You duck into a shaded portico just off the street. It belongs to a friend of a friend. Or maybe an ex-employer, or possibly someone who still thinks you owe him a jug of wine. Either way, the bench is unoccupied, and you claim it like a throne. You lean back against the cool stone wall. It smells like dust and faded lemons. Perfect. Moments later, you're drifting. Not asleep exactly, just adrift in that hazy space between dreams and to-do lists. Somewhere in the distance, a lute plinks out a sleepy tune. Closer by, a chicken squawks indignantly. You try to ignore both. In the courtyard beside you, a family snoozes openly on woven mats. A grandmother fans herself with a palm leaf. A child lies starfished across the floor, drooling with wild abandon. A merchant nearby is snoring so loudly that birds keep lifting off in alarm, then settling back down again like nothing happened. You try to nap, but every time you're nearly under, someone makes noise. A pot clatters. A neighbor shouts at a donkey. The donkey brays back. You shift your position, attempting to fold your toga under your head like a pillow. It doesn't help. It feels like sleeping on a badly folded tent. Quirky tidbit. Romans believed that dreams during Meridiatio were more truthful than night dreams. You try to dream of something useful, a vision of treasure, a message from Mercury, or maybe just an indication of what you're supposed to do with your life. Instead, your brain conjures a giant talking fish quoting bad poetry. Thanks, brain. You finally drift off properly. Maybe for 5 minutes, maybe for 20. Time bends strangely in the afternoon heat. But then, someone drops a bucket 2 houses over, and you're jerked back to reality. You blink, mouth dry, head heavy, and vaguely disappointed you didn't wake up fluent in Greek. You stumble to your feet and squint around. The city is stirring again. A shopkeeper pulls back his curtain. Someone relights a torch in a shadowy corridor. The fruit vendor down the street rolls his cart back into place, already yelling about plums so sweet they'll forgive your debts. You walk past a couple deep in a post-nap quarrel. She's holding a sandal. He's holding a broken jar. You don't ask. You keep moving. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished bronze mirror propped against a market stall. Your hair is doing something wild. Your tunic is rumpled, and you've got a smear of fig on your chin. You clean up as best you can with the hem of your sleeve, which is probably making it worse. The sun is a little lower now, softening its light. The shadows have returned, longer and calmer. Everything is coated in a warm glow that makes even cracked walls look nostalgic. The heat is gentler, and the city feels almost generous again. You pause to admire a mosaic on the side of a building. Waves and sea creatures in blue and white tile. It glimmers in the afternoon light. A passing man stops too and grunts. Looks expensive. You nod like an art critic. You continue down the street, passing more drowsy-eyed citizens emerging from naps with the same expression, part confusion, part resignation, and all of them wondering what day it is. A group of children kick a ball made of rags. It sails through the air, knocks over a jug of olives, and the yelling begins anew. A vendor offers you a sweet cake drizzled with honey and something he calls fig extract. You accept. It's sticky, possibly medicinal, but your body thanks you anyway. You take another bite and watch a cloud of starlings wheel across the sky in the distance. Their movements are so perfectly synchronized it looks choreographed. You wonder if the gods use birds to write messages in the sky. Historians still argue whether augury, the practice of reading omens from birds, was taken seriously by the common folk or just a superstition for festivals and fearful mornings. You finish your cake and brush off the crumbs, now fully reawakened. The day still stretches ahead. There's time yet for one more misadventure, one more conversation, or one more strange rumor whispered over wine. But for now, you're grateful. For the bench, the half-nap, and the city that lets you rest even as it refuses to stop moving. Pompeii naps hard, but it wakes up swinging. You wipe the last of the fig glaze from your fingertips, take a deep breath of post-nap Pompeii air, which smells faintly of warm brick, crushed thyme, and just a whisper of donkey, and make your way toward the Temple of Venus. Not for prayer exactly, but because someone mentioned omens, and now your curiosity is officially awake. Religion in Pompeii is everywhere and nowhere all at once. It's not so much about belief as it is about rhythm, rituals tucked into daily life like seasoning in a stew. A sprinkle of prayer here, a pinch of sacrifice there, all stirred together with whatever gods are trending this week. You pass a doorway with a tiny shrine wedged into the brick, 2 weather-worn lars, a dish of dried figs, and a single wilting flower. Someone's daily offering. You pause for a second and nod. The household gods get less attention than Jupiter, but they're the ones watching whether your stew burns and if your sandals survive the week. The Temple of Venus is busier than usual. People come and go, each with their own reasons. Some noble, some very much not. You see a man clutching a clay statuette and muttering under his breath. A woman leaves behind a length of blue ribbon. Nearby, a child lights incense and then immediately sneezes on it. The scent of burnt offerings hangs in the air, sweet resin, singed feathers, and a touch of panic. You notice a priestess arranging fruits and bread on a stone altar, eyes closed in concentration. You don't interrupt. She's wearing a robe that says, "Do not disturb," without saying anything at all. You circle around the temple courtyard, admiring the columns. One is cracked. You wonder if it's always been like that, or if it's new. Lately, everything seems to creak just a little more. People have noticed. They just don't talk about it. A few townsfolk linger nearby, swapping omens. One man claims he saw lightning strike the same tree twice. Another says a goat gave birth to twins with the same face. That doesn't even make sense, but he's very confident. You listen and nod. The stories are better than the wine. You drop a coin into a fountain and murmur a quick prayer, not to Venus specifically, but to anyone on duty. Something simple. Just a general plea for continued sandals, fewer lice, and no earthquakes. Not too much to ask. Historians still debate how much faith ancient people actually had in these rituals. Were they truly devoted, or just covering their bases? After all, the gods can be fickle, and Pompeians are practical. If worshipping Bacchus means your vineyard won't flood, you light the candle. If sacrificing a chicken keeps your mother-in-law quiet, you sharpen the knife. As you wander away from the temple, you spot a man in a hooded cloak reading from a scroll. He looks like he's trying to summon something, or maybe he's just rehearsing for a play. You don't ask. Further down the street, you pass a stall selling little clay amulets, figures of Mercury, miniature Herculeses, and a few odd charms shaped like, well, let's call them fertility symbols. The seller winks and says they're very effective. You buy one anyway. Insurance. You duck into a small alley where the walls are painted with the scenes of the gods. Mars striding into battle, Apollo playing his lyre, Diana mid-hunt. Some of the paint has faded, but the energy is still there. You run your fingers lightly over the edge of a mosaic. Venus rising from the sea, flanked by dolphins who look mildly unimpressed. Quirky fact: some Pompeians kept miniature altars in their shops, praying for profit. Others hired professional augurs to interpret dreams or read bird signs. You once saw a man refuse to sell beans because a crow cawed twice in the wrong direction. Bold move. you spot a small crowd near the temple of Apollo, watching a street preacher wave his arms and shout about fire from the sky. Most people shrug it off. Just another eccentric with too much time and not enough sandals. Still, the hairs on your arm stand up. You can't help it. You slip away and head toward the edge of town, where the walls of the necropolis rise just beyond the gate. It's quiet here. The tombs are simple, solemn, carved with names, professions, and the occasional boast. He made bread and told no lies. A noble legacy. You sit on a stone bench facing the city. From here, you can see rooftops, swaying laundry, temple domes, and the smudge of Vesuvius looming in the background like a bored giant. A few dark clouds cling to the peak. You squint. Is it smoke, steam, or just a regular afternoon shadow? You shake your head. Probably nothing. The gods would give clearer signs, wouldn't they? A breeze rustles through the olive trees. The air smells momentarily of sage and soil. You close your eyes and offer a quiet thanks to Venus, Apollo, or whichever household deity might be listening. Pompeii isn't just a city of walls and work and bread. It's a city of rituals, sacred, strange, and sometimes spontaneous. A place where prayer seeps into everyday life like wine into linen. Not always noticed, but always there. You rise from the bench, brush the dust from your sleeves, and head back toward the main road. You've got a lucky charm in your pocket, incense smoke in your hair, and just enough faith to believe that tomorrow will look a lot like today. At least, that's what you tell yourself. You make your way back into town, weaving through a narrower part of the street where the walls feel like they're closing in just slightly. Shadows settle thicker here, cooler, quieter. The chatter of the forum fades, replaced by a different kind of music. Claws scratching, tails flicking, feathers flapping. Pompeii, for all its mosaics and marble, is teeming with creatures great and small. A dog darts across the street in front of you, nearly causing a man with a cart full of amphorae to tip over. The man curses loudly, but the dog doesn't even blink. He's got places to be. Probably his usual post near the bakery, where he collects crumbs and glares at pigeons. Dogs in Pompeii are everywhere. Some have collars and names. Others just drift from one street to the next like furry citizens, with zero taxes and far too much attitude. You've even seen one painted in a mural, mid-snarl, on a tile near someone's front door. Cave Canem. Beware of dog. Not because it bites, mostly because it judges. You pass a stall where a boy is selling songbirds in woven cages. The birds chirp frantically, hopping from bar to bar. They bring good luck, he says, eyeing your tunic like you might have a coin tucked somewhere. You nod, but decline. You've had enough luck today, just avoiding that snail dye man. Further ahead, you pass a home with a large parrot cage in the front courtyard. The bird squawks, then mutters something suspiciously like donkey face. You don't take it personally. Parrots pick up everything around here, even insults. Quirky detail. Some wealthy Pompeians imported monkeys as pets, actual monkeys. One house was rumored to keep one trained to serve drinks. You're not sure if that's impressive or terrifying. Either way, you give side-eye to every statue you pass, just in case. Not all creatures are pets, though. Pompeii has a pest problem. You feel it in the corners of kitchens, behind clay jars, and deep in the shadows of bakeries. Rats, always sneaky. You once saw one climb a stack of amphorae like it was a staircase. The baker screamed louder than the rat. Cats, also present, though more elusive. Occasionally you'll spot one curled in the shade, licking its paws like royalty, and pretending it doesn't care about your existence. That's how you know it's healthy. And then there are the weirder companions. A neighbor claims his cousin kept a snake in the courtyard to ward off evil. Historians still argue whether these serpents were pets, symbols, or just very lazy security systems. Either way, you've started checking every corner a little more carefully. You turn down a side alley and hear a high-pitched squeal. Not a person, a piglet. Someone's keeping livestock a little too close to the bakery again. It snorts and scampers away, chased by a child holding what appears to be a leek. You don't ask questions. In the next street, you pass a villa with a small bronze plaque outside. On it, the outline of a dog, its ears perked and tail stiff. Below it, a simple inscription, Fido, the Loyal. You stop for a moment. Maybe it was a guard dog, or a beloved companion, or both. You smile and keep walking. In the public baths earlier, you remember seeing a woman washing what might have been a ferret, or a very angry squirrel. She claimed it was a gift from a trader who'd been to Germania. It tried to bite her sandal the entire time. A unique expression of affection, apparently. You reach a square where a vendor is selling herbal sachets, lavender, rosemary, and dried sage bundled in linen. She says they keep the fleas off your pillow. You don't entirely believe her, but you buy one anyway. It smells like a garden pretending to be a god. You sit on the edge of a fountain, the water trickling lazily behind you. A pair of doves land nearby and start pecking at the crumbs you didn't realize you were dropping. One hops onto your sandal. You freeze. It coos. You relax. Until it leaves a very small, very direct blessing on your foot. You sigh. You're about to get up when a boy walks by with a leash. At the end of it, not a dog, not a cat, but a goose. It honks proudly. You look at the boy. He shrugs like this is just Tuesday. Maybe it is. Pompeii's animals aren't just decoration. They're woven into the rhythm of the place. They scurry through alleys, lounge in temples, sleep in workshops, and bark in the middle of philosophical arguments. Sometimes they're companions, sometimes they're meals, sometimes they're just trying to survive, same as you. You rise from the fountain and take a final look at the birds fluttering along the rooftops, the dogs lounging in the sun, the bees buzzing near a fig tree. There's something comforting about how they move through the city, unnoticed and yet always present, like the gods or the gossip. You walk on, brushing your sandal off as best you can, and wonder briefly what kind of animal the city would be if it had a soul. probably a street-smart dog. A little loud, a little messy, fiercely loyal, and always watching. Just like Pompeii, you find yourself on the edge of one of Pompeii's more elegant neighborhoods, the kind of district where the walls are straighter, the mosaics more smug, and the silence somehow more expensive. This is where the elite live, the domus of senators, retired generals, and merchants who've sold enough amphorae of olive oil to build a private bathhouse and still have change for imported peacocks. You slow your pace a little, not because you're tired, but because these houses invite curiosity. Or maybe they demand it. The first villa you pass has a facade painted bright red with geometrical borders, a sign of wealth and fashionable taste. Through the open door, you catch a glimpse of a long atrium, gleaming with polished stone. The impluvium at the center is full, reflecting sunlight like a mirror framed in flowers. Even the water here looks more cultured. A servant hurries past carrying a platter of figs and walnuts. He doesn't see you. He's probably late for a luncheon in the triclinium, the dining room, where guests recline on couches, complain about poetry, and pretend the wine isn't watered down. You lean slightly to peek into the atrium. The walls are painted with vivid frescoes, scenes of gods, hunting, feasts, and myths retold in red, gold, and cobalt blue. One shows Narcissus gazing into the water. You smirk. He looks suspiciously like your neighbor's teenage son. Historians still argue whether these lavish homes were decorated to impress neighbors or to honor the gods. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe Pompeians just liked a little drama on their walls. You continue walking and pass another domus with a gated garden visible from the street. Behind the ironwork, hedges are trimmed into careful shapes, and a small fountain burbles beside marble statues of cherubs who all look slightly judgmental. A woman lounges under a pergola, fanning herself lazily. Her dress is stitched with golden thread. Her earrings catch the sun. You suddenly become very aware of the olive stain on your tunic. Next door is the House of the Faun, one of the largest in the city. You've heard of it, though you've never been brave enough to go inside. Rumor has it the floors are mosaiced from wall to wall, including a massive depiction of Alexander the Great in battle. Thousands of tiles, months of work, all for a floor that gets walked on by sandaled feet. You glance down at your own sandals. They do not deserve Alexander the Great. Even the ceilings here are fancy, coffered and painted with patterns so intricate they make your neck hurt just imagining the artist who had to lie on scaffolding to finish them. The kind of detail that says, "Yes, I own 5 couches and a statue of Bacchus." What of it? You spot a servant watering potted plants along a colonnade. The plants look healthier than half the people you know. You watch as she clips a single wilted leaf and tosses it aside like an insult. Quirky detail. Wealthy Romans often had an exedra, a garden room used for philosophical discussion, lectures, or just dramatic lounging. One man allegedly held debates with himself out loud in his. You once tried that. Your cousin told you to stop scaring the chickens. In another domus, the door is ajar, revealing a glimpse of a private library. Scrolls stacked in neat shelves, each labeled with wax tags. You dream briefly of being allowed inside, of reading Plato while sipping cooled wine, instead of squinting at graffiti scratched into bathhouse walls. You pass a wall with a mosaic that catches your breath. A dog chained by the neck, tiles shimmering in the fading light. Its eyes are wide, almost pleading. Beneath it, the inscription again. Cave Renem. It's famous. It's haunting. And despite its beauty, it still somehow makes you walk a little faster. Further down the street, a marble statue of Hermes stands at a corner, arms outstretched as if offering directions or blocking them. Someone has placed a garland of wilted flowers at its feet. You nod politely. When in doubt, show respect to the fast-footed gods. At the end of the road, you reach a house with golden doors. Not literally gold, but painted to look it. Inside, servants bustle around an elaborate peristyle garden. Pillars circling a courtyard lined with flowers, fruit trees, and fountains that sing over stone basins. In the center stands a statue of Venus rising from a shell, one hand to her hair, the other holding nothing and everything at once. You wonder what it's like to live like that. To sip cooled drinks while the garden breezes dance through silk curtains. To walk barefoot on mosaic floors and never once stub your toe on a broken cobblestone. To own a room solely for reclining. It's hard to imagine. But then again, you've got your own slice of sky, your own shrine, your own crooked courtyard. You pass back into the humbler streets, feeling oddly inspired. Rich homes are beautiful, but they're quiet. Maybe too quiet. You miss the noise already. Still, the mosaics shimmer in your mind. The careful paintwork, the whisper of a fountain echoing in a stone atrium. You think of the house gods watching over every household, grand or modest, and you smile. Because in Pompeii, even the richest marble fountains trickle down the same mountain as your little courtyard well. And that counts for something. Evening starts to lean over the rooftops, draping Pompeii in golden softness. The walls warm to a deeper hue. The noise of the marketplace dims to a background murmur, and you feel the city take a long, slow breath. But you know what's coming. Something louder, grander, dustier. You're going to the amphitheater. It sits on the far end of town, an oval colossus carved from stone, designed not just for spectacle, but for scale. As you near it, the crowd thickens. Children ride their parents' shoulders. Vendors shout about roasted nuts and honeyed almonds. And someone tries to sell you a wooden whistle shaped like a dolphin. You almost buy it. Almost. The air smells of dust, sweat, and anticipation. It hums with excitement that gets under your skin. You reach the outer walls of the amphitheater and look up. It's not as massive as the Colosseum in Rome, but it's older. And today, it feels every bit as alive. You squeeze through the archway, ticket in hand, or rather, a little shard of clay marked with your gate number. An usher with a very impressive mustache nods and points you toward your section. You climb the stone steps, following the crowd, until you find a spot not too close to the arena floor, but close enough to smell the sand. Pompeii's amphitheater holds around 20,000 people. That's nearly the whole city. And on days like this, it feels like the whole city is here. Laughing, arguing, eating, throwing shade across marble benches. Someone 2 rows down is already asleep. Someone else is already drunk. Today's program? Gladiators. Maybe some animal fights. Maybe a comedy act if there's time. Maybe a mime. You shudder. There's always a mime. A horn sounds. The crowd perks up. You lean forward. From a dark tunnel, the first gladiator emerges. Bronze helmet gleaming. Trident raised. Net coiled like a snake in his other hand. A murmillo, maybe. Or a retiarius. You're not an expert, but you know drama when you see it. He paces the sand like a dancer who's also thinking about stabbing someone. The crowd roars. Then comes his opponent. Bigger, slower, carrying a massive shield and short sword. His armor clinks with every step. They circle. They pause. Then clash. The first few moments are mostly testing. Jabs, feints. The crowd eats it up. People start shouting names, insults, advice no one's listening to. The woman beside you is loudly rooting for the underdog and also loudly eating grapes. A man behind you swears he saw this exact fight in Herculaneum last month. No one believes him. The fight escalates. Dust rises. The net is thrown, missed. The sword scrapes metal. You flinch as a helmet is knocked sideways. Blood spatters the sand. Not much, but enough for gasps. Quirky fact: not all gladiator fights ended in death. In fact, most didn't. These men are expensive to train. Some are slaves, yes, but others are volunteers seeking fame. There are contracts, trainers, fan clubs. You once saw graffiti of a gladiator's name followed by, "He makes the girls sigh." Classy. The match ends with a draw. Both men bowing, arms raised. The crowd is torn between cheering and booing. The announcer steps in, makes a joke, and throws a handful of figs into the stands. One hits your shoulder. You consider it a blessing. Then, a pause. The next act, a comedy duo. One's dressed as a goat. The other is pretending to be a philosopher. You sigh. It's mime time. The crowd loves it, though. Children shriek with laughter. A man 2 rows down laughs so hard he chokes on his olive pit. Historians still argue whether the amphitheater was more about entertainment or civic bonding. You think it's probably both. This is where Pompeii breathes together, cheering, cringing, laughing at the same slapstick goat joke for the 100th time. As the sun dips lower, the shadows inside the arena stretch. The final event is a venatio, a beast hunt. You lean forward, equal parts horror and curiosity. A trapdoor opens. A lion emerges. Then a hunter. The match is brief, messy. The crowd cheers. You don't. As the day winds down, the crowd slowly trickles out. People stretch their legs, compare notes, throw the last crumbs of their snacks to the pigeons. Someone starts singing. Someone else throws a tunic over their head to block it. You walk slowly back through the arch, the evening air now tinged with smoke from cook fires. Your sandals are coated in dust. Your ears ring faintly. Your heart still echoes with the rhythm of the crowd. You glance back at the arena. It's quieter now. Just a big stone circle, waiting for tomorrow. Waiting for another round of shouting, clapping, laughing, and fig throwing. You make your way home under the amber sky, remembering the glint of the gladiator's helmet, the sound of sandals scraping stone, the way the crowd roared like one giant, joyful beast. And even though your seat was a little too hard and the mime a little too mimey, you'd come back. You always do. Because in Pompeii, the day may belong to chores and markets, but the night belongs to the arena. The sky over Pompeii has cooled to a velvet blue, dotted with the first flickers of stars and the occasional trail of smoke from evening fires. You walk the streets more slowly now, not from fatigue, though your feet do complain, but from something else, a softness, a stillness, a sense that the city, like you, is beginning to wind itself down. Shops have closed their shutters. The laughter of amphitheater crowds has faded into quiet murmurs drifting from open windows. Torches are being lit one by one, their flames dancing in rhythm with footsteps on the paving stones. You glance up and see the moon peeking from behind the rim of Vesuvius. It's full tonight. That always seems to make the dogs bark more than usual. You pass a home where a family sits gathered around a low table, sharing figs and honey cakes by candlelight. They don't see you, but their voices, gentle, teasing, familiar, spill out into the street like warm soup on a cold night. You smile and keep walking. In a side alley, someone plucks a lyre. The notes are uncertain, meandering. Not a song so much as a memory trying to take shape. You don't recognize the tune, but it clings to you as you pass. You reach the outskirts of your neighborhood, where the walls grow older, chipped, and more honest. The graffiti here is faded. Names of long-forgotten lovers, jokes scratched by bored hands, and declarations that seem absurd now. Pompeii will last forever. Maybe they meant it as a prayer, or a dare. You duck under an archway and pause by your neighbor's tiny shrine. A candle flickers beside a figure of Mercury, his wings barely visible in the low light. Someone's left a grape and a half-melted piece of cheese, a modest offering, but no less sincere. You wonder, not for the first time, how much of this city is being carried by these little acts? An old man lighting incense at dawn, a child whispering thanks after dropping a coin, a baker drawing a heart in flour on her counter before laying down the dough. Historians still argue whether Pompeians were deeply religious or just creatures of habit. But habits shape cities, and this city has many. You turn into your own courtyard. It's quiet here, the kind of quiet you feel more than here. A single oil lamp glows on your windowsill, casting long shadows across the wall where your Lares still stand in their painted niche. You greet them silently and light a second lamp, not because you must, but because it feels right. The air smells of clay, lavender, and old stories. You sink onto your bench, kick off your sandals, and stretch your legs. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then stops. A cart rolls lazily over stones in the distance, probably headed to the bakery for tomorrow's first batch. Your body aches in small, satisfying ways, the kind of ache that says you lived today, that you walked the streets, watched the fights, tasted the figs, avoided the mime, that you did your part in this sprawling, chaotic mosaic of humanity. Above, the stars glimmer brighter now, and you let yourself imagine what they must have looked like hundreds of years ago, or what they will look like hundreds from now. You wonder if they'll still shine over this city. And then you feel it, the gentlest tremble beneath your feet, like a sigh, barely there, a trick of the wine, maybe, or a warning too small to matter. You close your eyes, the torches flicker, the city sleeps. And now, as the last candle gutters out and the night wraps Pompeii in its cool, quiet arms, you allow your breath to slow. The voices of the city have hushed. The animals are still. Even the gods, tucked into their shrines and statues, seem to rest for now. Your feet are warm beneath the blanket. The ache in your back softens. The weight of the day lifts gently, like steam rising from a bath. You think about the bread you ate, the laughter you shared, the dust you brushed from your tunic, and somehow, even in its chaos, everything made sense. Let the memories of painted walls and warm fountains blur into the back of your mind. Let the clang of sandals and the bark of dogs fade to nothing but distant echoes. You are here now, in the softness of night, and there is nothing left to do but rest. Tomorrow will come with its own noise, its own mess, its own charm. But tonight, the city is quiet. The stars are holding their breath, and the ground, though restless, is still. So sink a little deeper. Let your muscles melt. Let your thoughts drift. You are safe. You are still. You are home. Sleep now.